So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go a little different. I'm going to do our introduction. Then I'm going to ask, for our members of our OG to introduce themselves. And if you're substituting for someone or representing an association, please speak up during that time period. And then we'll go into our staff presentation from that. Ebony, Matt, does that sound like okay with you guys?
Sounds great to me. Thank you.
And for our applicant and some of our other folks from staff online, I will have you all introduce yourself when we get to the item to which you're speaking, unless you really want to talk right now, but I presume you've got something better to do, like the latest episode of Law & Order. So let me get up my script, and we are going to get started. Good evening, everyone. This is the February 17th meeting of the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group. For the safety of our OG members and county staff, we are holding a virtual meeting today. All participants with us are joining remotely. We are legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive order, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the County Board's Continuity of Operations Ordinance adopted of March 2020, almost a year old now. I'd like to orient everyone to our new virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how today's meeting will run. Today's meeting is available to join from the calendar invite in Microsoft Teams link, the Form-Based Code on the Form-Based Code Auxiliary Working Group's webpage, the county's event calendar, and at the top of today's agenda. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone number option for those who wish to use it. If anyone loses internet connectivity during our meeting and you cannot reconnect, please join us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. This is really important for everyone. I do want to see you. I do want to hear you, but please do mute and turn off your videos. It will help with bandwidth and other issues we suffer throughout this process. For everyone joining us via Teams, please turn off your video feed. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking the microphone icon that's located in your meeting bar. We'll remind you if you forget, but I do not have the power, nor does the moderator, to unmute you. You will have to unmute yourself. If you're joining us by phone, remember that you need to press *6 to unmute yourself. The meeting chat is active and turned on. That does not mean you should be using it for discussion, public comment, questions about the agenda items, or requests for more information. Please raise your hand using your icon or unmute yourself and put your video feed on. Signal me that you would like to be recognized so that we can all hear and see the conversation. All public comments should be made in that form. And I think that will cover everything for this evening. So with that, I would like to, first, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Stephen Hughes. I'm a planning commissioner, and I happen to be the OG chairman at the moment. It looks like one of my fellow commissioners has chosen to join us, so I'll let him introduce himself. Leo, would you mind introducing yourself? Commissioner Sarley.
And hear from Stephen and the OG group. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Great to have you joining us this evening. I would also like to, I'm going to go down the list, and I'm going to try to catch all of the familiar names I see on here. And if I miss your name, I'm going to have you speak up and join yourself. So Betty, you're an OG member. Please introduce yourself and which group you represent.
Hi, my name's Betty Siegel, and I represent Arlington Heights Civic Association.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to work on down. Mark?
Yeah, Mark Cole, and I represent Alcova Heights.
See you, Mark. Juliet, are you representing your civic association this evening?
Yes, Juliet Hisney, representing Columbia Heights Civic Association.
Okay. Go, Keith.
Hi, I don't know if you, I'm having trouble with my video here, but I'm Keith Fred. I'm representing Barcroft.
Catherine. Kathy, sorry.
Hi, this is Kathy Guernsey from Columbia Forest.
Kim.
Hello, this is Kim Klingler representing Columbia Pike Revitalization Organization, CPRO, and I also have Amy McWilliams with me. Not physically, of course.
Oh, Amy, would you mind introducing yourself so everyone can hear your voice and name, just so we can all?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Amy McWilliams, CPRO.
Thanks, Amy. Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right, Linda.
Linda Dye, representing Douglas Park.
Oh, goodness, it keeps on going. There's way too many people for a normal meeting. We would have had to found the new room if we did this. Pete, you're not
Stephanie's fault.
Noreen, you can introduce yourself now that you're on.
Well, Keith, Fred's up. Or Keith,
Who do I got?
go ahead.
Keith's already Keith, introduce yourself. Noreen.
Okay, I'm Noreen Quill, and I am the representative for Austin Mill.
Mic check, everyone. Check your mutes, please. Reggie, are you representing Columbia Heights, or is
No, I'm not representing.
You're just hanging out tonight. You're like Pete. You're like Pete.
I'm a background individual.
Great to have you then. You're just like
I'm
Pete
a resident
Dugan.
of Arlington Village as well as living in Columbia Heights, but I'm not representing anyone formally.
Okay, no one's not representing one formally tonight. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know you were talking about me. This is Pete, but yep, I'm here just representing Penn.
It looks like Steph's representing Penrose tonight, so we just have two.
You got two of us, aren't you lucky?
Yeah, I know. And who else from our who are OG members who I failed to recognize because I'm missing my roster, and you guys are keep on changing on me a little bit.
This is us. Yeah, this is Steph Pryor with Penrose, and Maria Pete Durgan is our president. And yes, I did promote this to the Columbia Pike Presidents Group because a lot of people are interested.
That's fine, Steph. That's fine. Just remember, you guys represent, so I just always want to make sure who's representing what tonight, so I can try to keep us all honest. That's all. Anybody else who's representing your civic association this evening who I have failed to meet?
Hi, it's Jim Smith for Foxcroft Heights.
Jim, I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. Our friends at the East, we could never forget you. You're hanging out there under a number calling in. Okay, good to know, Jim. All right. With that, Matt, I believe you're going to help welcome our first agenda item.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. And what I wanted to do is provide some general updates before the rest of the agenda gets going. We thought it might be helpful since we last met in December. I think it's a healthy habit of just kind of giving you a status update of where things stand, particularly development-wise, but also in terms of our work plan for this year, some key things we expect to either continue to assess or if they're getting close, when may they actually reach the OG for discussion and consideration. So with that, I wanted to start with the overall development map for the corridor, which has not changed since December. We're still tracking a few final, tweaks to development activity, but for the most part, what we reported back in December has not really changed much. The active sites are still active. In particular, the Fillmore Gardens Shopping Center, which I'm going to get to in a second, but also the office building along 9th Street, which is undergoing a site plan amendment to upgrade its existing condition and enhance the office environment there. So we don't have any specific engagement dates or when that might reach Planning Commission or County Board, but I think once we get more information, we'll definitely report back. So this is kind of just a development summary. If we go to the next slide, what I wanted to focus on is really something that's going to be closely monitored throughout the year. And this is the application that was just filed last week, and that is the redevelopment using the commercial form-based code for the strip along Columbia Pike, where the existing office is and the CVS. And of particular importance is a missing segment of Cleveland Street and the second half, the western half of the Penrose Square Plaza. So all those elements are included in this proposal, some of which are going to be considered as part of the actual use permit review that ultimately reaches the county board. Other elements like the plaza design will happen post-approval through a county process. consistent with what we've done earlier for the eastern half. So while we're going to be developing a project website and uploading all the project pages on there, in the next slide, I did want to highlight just a high-level overview of the initial proposal. It is going to change because we already highlighted a number of things from a massing perspective that I think the second preliminary submission will have to address. But I did want to at least provide some expectations of what this might look like. It is a very long block face, and it will require some breaks in the massing along Columbia Pike. It is also dealing with a lot of topography, something that's going to trigger certain modifications as we get further into the review. But again, it is just the first preliminary application, and consistent with our review process, that's going to take several rounds of staff review before we feel like we've reached substantial compliance with the form-based code and are ready to bring it to the advisory working group. But I suspect as we will meet throughout the year, we'll provide updates of where things stand and continue to update the project website with newer drawings as they are filed. The next slide, I think, just kind of covers beyond this application, what else we might expect. Obviously, the next item on the agenda, we've been flagging to you since September that once it was filed, that around this time we would be expecting to review it. That moment has arrived, and we are also beginning to finally kick off the ground floor use discussion, which is going to take us through the rest of the year as well. Additional items, the Fillmore Gardens Shopping Center, if it stays on track, we expect that sometime in the fall we might be ready to review it with the advisory working group. And we're also monitoring of potential timing for introducing a lead requirement to the commercial form-based code. If you remember, our previous work plans have been tracking that item for quite some time, but we are trying to work with our DES partners to see if perhaps this year enough resources could be set aside to actually bring that forward and make that change permanent. Just to give you a heads up, we've at the beginning of the year reserved a number of monthly dates for the advisory working group. It's typically the second Wednesday of each month. So you can see where those dates are right now. There are likely going to be some opportunities where we don't need to meet. So I think as those dates approach us, we'll be sending you updates on whether or not we have an agenda or if the meeting is canceled. So just, you can check the AUG website for further updates. And I'm sure, Ebony will also be notifying you as we go forward. So that's everything I had. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for that update. And we note you say it was opportunities not to meet, not condolences, but it's okay. We know how you feel. Any questions out there for Matt while we have him, or Ebony? Anyone? Do we have any questions about the update?
I just have a quick question.
Go ahead, Reggie.
The Fillmore Gardens Shopping Center, just someone remind me, please. He mentioned it, but I just forgot. What stage is it in? Is it just an idea? Is it gotten into any civic association or community meetings? Or just where is it right now?
Well, it's been an idea for quite some time. We've been discussing it with the property owner. Well, I won't age myself, but for a while. And they have filed officially last week, so early mid-February. But this is just the start of the review process. So again, the initial review for a form-based code project is really staff-driven. But I do understand that I think the attorney and/or applicant, I think, have scheduled a meeting. Perhaps it may have even taken place already with Penrose, just to introduce the project and let everybody know that it's coming.
It was last night.
Okay.
Last night. Does this include the existing Fillmore Gardens apartments behind the retail?
Now, if we go up one slide, you can see it's just a commercial strip. So that alley that currently serves the existing commercial uses is kind of the dividing point, and all the residential complex, the buildings immediately north of that alley would remain
right
as they are.
Thank you. I see.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's a good opportunity as a reminder that the applicant has made their first filing with staff. The applicant is free. We can never, impinge upon someone else's right to reach out and do whatever outreach they may or may not want to do. But staff will perform its review. That's part of how the form-based code is set up. And then at the conclusion of the staff review, when staff believes a compliant proposal is ready or a compliant proposal with modifications is ready, they will bring it first to this OG. Then from the OG, it will go to the Planning Commission, and from the Planning Commission, it will go to the County Board for review. Matt, did I miss anything there? Good summary.
Quick question.
That's perfect.
Okay, I've had 2 questions for the audience. Juliet, I'm going to let Juliet, please.
Yeah, real quickly, just at the schedule, is the 2400 project moving on to commissions after tonight, or could there be another review date for it?
2400, you're talking about this?
Rappahannock. Yes.
Let's get into that question, Juliet, because that's our next item. So let's have the staff present their work on that one, then the applicant, and then we can address that question in there. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, and I have a slide that talks about the overall schedule for all form-based code projects, which I think gets at that element of it. But the applicant's presentation is pretty comprehensive and really captures not just the updated design, but also where they stand in terms of the modifications that we approved the last go around in 2016. So they pretty much have all the elements embedded in one presentation for purposes of efficiency, but I'll be happy to jump back on and share one slide that we have on the process and kind of highlight where we are and what's still in front of us.
Thank you.
Keith, I see you've turned on your camera. Do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I just forgot to turn it off.
Okay. All right. With that, Ebony and our applicant, we're going to have you all introduce yourself and give us our presentation.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you here tonight. I am Ebony Dumas, and I'm an associate planner with the county and also your Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group staff liaison. So tonight's first agenda item is the 2400 Columbia Pike Major Use Permit Amendment. The applicant last presented at the OG in March 2016, and the use permit was approved by the County Board in June 2016. However, last summer, under new ownership, the applicant met with staff to review proposed amendments to the use permit. Under guidance from the Form-Based Code, staff worked with the zoning administrator to determine that the proposed modifications constitute a major use permit amendment. Due to the historic facade designation and Form-Based Code requirements, the applicant has recently presented at the HLRB twice and was approved for a new certificate of appropriateness on January 27th. Some of you may recall the 2016 application was pretty similar, and many of the modifications were to comply with HLRB's guidance back then. And so since that guidelines, those supersede the Form-Based Code, we are looking at an application that has been redesigned, but a lot of the modifications remain the same. So we anticipate this amendment going before the County Board sometime in the spring. And at this point, I'll pass it on to the applicant to present in greater detail, and they will be available for a Q&A about the proposed Form-Based Code modifications when they are done.
Applicant, I see a lot of team members. Who's going to be doing our speaking this evening?
Good evening. This is
Thanks.
Tess Kelly from KGD Architecture. I actually just had my computer randomly reboot on me, but I'm getting the presentation up. I'll let Matt Allman, our attorney, introduce the project as I'm getting this ready to screen share.
All right.
And Chris Gordon too. I'll be chiming in at points.
Hey, Chris, I like the background. You guys got the whole KGD thing in there.
Land use council for the
that.
project.
Get a lot of compliments. Thanks.
Can you all hear me?
Yep, we hear you great, Matt. Let you go.
Okay, thanks very much. Again, this is Matt Allman with Venable, Land Use Council for the project. Thank you very much, Stephen and members of the OG for having us this evening. I'm joined tonight by Yao Yao from YW Capital Management, new owner of the project site, as well as our whole design team. We have KGD architecture, working on the building itself. We have Walter Phillips, civil engineer, on the line, and LSG landscape architects as well. As Ebony mentioned, this project has already been entitled with a form-based code use permit that was approved in 2016. And since that time, of course, there have been, there's been no construction activity on the site. It hasn't moved forward. But of course, there have been several other projects up and down Columbia Pike that have gone through the entitlement process, gone through permitting, and in fact been constructed and delivered. So, oh, great, we've got the presentation slides up. Thank you, Tess. So it sort of begs the question, why weren't the previous owners able to move forward with the 2016 approved project and implement it? I think it suggests that there are elements of the development program and the building construction that maybe were holding the design back and that needed to be tweaked a little bit in order to make the project something that could be brought to market. So Tess, can you advance to the second slide?
Yep. To
Matt?
the index, or
Matt, we lost you if you're trying to speak.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me now? I'm looking at the second slide. Hopefully everyone can see it on the screen.
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, apologies. My connection is a little poor this evening. So if I drop off, Tess, please take it and run with it, and I'll call back in. But anyway, we'll try and go through our presentation as quickly as we can and save time for Q&A. We'll take just a moment or two to look back at what was approved in 2016, and then I'll turn it over to Tess and the KGD team to do some approved versus proposed comparisons, and then show you the latest architecture. And then finally, we'll conclude talking about the form-based code modifications. So Tess, if you could advance, I guess, 2 slides. Okay, thank you. So this is the approved 2016 ground floor plan. And now that the site has come under new ownership and a new design team has been brought on, we've had an opportunity to look at this and really examine what could be improved, what can be done to make this design work a little bit better. And so some of the challenges of the 2016 plan as it relates to ground floor include 6 different retail bays, very rigid design. Each one of those retail bays is actually at a different slab elevation, which doesn't allow for any flexibility to combine retail space or add and subtract retail area. It's basically a take it or leave it proposition for those retailers. The retail bays are quite shallow. And additionally, you'll see in the center of the building, that's where the residential lobby and amenities are. And by putting it right in the middle, you lead to very sort of duplicative elevator and stairway access for the retail space on either side of that residential entrance. The parking provided in the 2016 plan was really the bare minimum, and we think maybe a bit too low for what realistically retail would desire along the Pike. And then finally, the upper stories were set back quite a distance from the historic retail facades, which leads to a pretty complicated and inefficient upper story design. So quickly, here's to speak to the architecture and the challenges we identified there. There is some pretty complicated cantilevering going on, which is complex and expensive from a construction standpoint. There's very forced symmetry to the architecture. No balconies on any units, which we think is a missed opportunity. And again, that very extreme upper level setback really compromises the footprint of the residential stories. Next slide, please. And so this will be my last slide. I'll just note, I think it's helpful to understand what we are proposing to change and what we aren't. So the revised building design increases the number of units by 15. You'll see a relocation of the residential lobby space, and KGD will talk more about how that improves the ground floor layout and gives not only better residential lobby, but better retail as well. There's a slight increase in residential GFA on the upper stories. There is a proposed use of a little bit of an outlot that the prior application just left untouched and didn't utilize. Adding balconies on all facades, updating the architecture to better complement the historic retail, and then increasing in parking. What's not being changed are really the core elements of the development. The building siting, the building use is not changing. It's still ground floor retail with residential above. The details of the facade preservation are going to be the same. The building height and the floor heights. Garage layout is extremely similar, except for a few efficiency improvements. Construction type is the same. The on-site circulation plan is the same. The streetscape details along Barton Street and Columbia Pike remain the same. A lot of the easements that we will be conveying to the county are the same. Materials, the quality is remaining constant or being improved from the 2016 plan, although some of the colors and individual materials have changed. The site grading is remaining exactly the same. The plan for the infrastructure and the utilities, very consistent. And then the plan for ground floor accessibility and achieving that universal accessibility across all the retail and residential entrances. That's something that we worked on very hard in 2016 and don't propose to revisit that with this application. So a lot of what you'll see for the proposed design will hopefully look somewhat familiar to the 2016 plan, but with some improvements to make the building look and feel a little bit nicer and function a lot better. So Tess, I'll hand the mic over to you to introduce the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And again, I'm here with Chris Gordon from my team, Bruno Levia, and our civil engineers as well. So I've had some connection issues tonight. If you lose me, they'll pick up where I leave off. So as Matt was saying, you know, big picture, the majority of this proposal is staying the same with just what we see to be great improvements to the site. So here, looking at the ground floor, we thought to improve the viability of the retail on Columbia Pike and Barton Street, the best thing that we can do is move everything that's encumbering it so that it could be as flexible as possible to serve whatever uses make sense when this project is delivered. So to do this, we moved the main residential entrance to the northeast corner and focused all the residential amenity spaces there. This also provides a good connection and views out the back to the residential open space, the OCLA in the rear, that also serves to meet the bioretention requirements. So we were able to make multiple improvements on this ground floor level, but none of the uses change. So it's still just retail and residential. The loading dock is in pretty much the same location. And the two main stair towers were pulled inboard on the building. This provides simplicity on the residential levels and we think helps improve the facade design not to have those stair towers on the exterior. Looking outside the building at the ground floor plan, this was the previously approved landscape plan, and then this is our proposed. So as you can see, The number of street trees remains the same, landscaping around the front remains the same. And then the biggest change here is in the rear of the property. The previous owner looked at trying to separate this portion of the lot and had, I guess, different intentions, but in this proposal, that portion is included in the landscape design, and additional parking to help support the retail and additional units is provided in the rear of the property. And this is just a rendered view of that residential outdoor space adjacent to the parking lot and how that will be utilized. It's not intended to be highly programmed, just a nice outdoor gathering space. Next, we want to compare the proposal from the previous by looking at the facades. So starting with the Columbia Pike facade, as Matt mentioned, the previously approved facade was this very regimented block concept, and we thought that didn't really fit in with the scale of the building and the surrounding developments on Columbia Pike. So not only did we want to tie in more with the surrounding neighbors, but it was really important to us to take cues from the historic facade design. So the historic facades, which you can see here and here with my cursor, the intent is not to treat them as a jewel box, but to take from the language used in the design and replicate that across the facade, and to break down the massing more to the intent of the form-based code with the discrete facades at more of a pedestrian scale. Moving around the building, this is the Barton Street facade. Here, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the previously approved plan had a raised portion of the sidewalk to allow Barton Street access to that retail, and we'll be maintaining that same condition. And then the west facade will have the same alleyway going along the side, east facade. And then our south facade facing our neighbors here. Again, the majority of the design function is the same. Parking underneath the rear of the building off the alleyway, loading and garage entrance, and we have all of those elements in functionally the same location. And I know there was a lot of coordination between the neighbors on the previous approval for a highly detailed fence design, and our intent is to just maintain that same design for the fence. We know that was an important conversation and design to the neighbors, and we just want to maintain that same exact previously approved fence condition. So starting to look at our proposal in 3D, the big move that we made on our Columbia Pike facade here is to kind of create a folded facade that came all the way down and hit the streetscape. And this folded facade allowed us to play with kind of highlighting the historic facades. You can see one here and then one kind of back behind the trees, and giving it the same kind of respect that it had in the previous proposal, where they did it by trying to set back the upper building more, but we felt like that didn't actually incorporate it into the fabric of the building as much. So by doing this, we're incorporating in the fabric, we're creating an activated streetscape, opportunities for seating, and then taking cues from, elements of the architecture, including the horizontality of the banding and the canopy elements and the brick detailing and stonework on the facade. So here's just a kind of zoomed in view from that Columbia Pike and Barton corner. You can start to see the lighter brick here are those two historic facades. And you can see how the bays on with the balconies above really create a nice level of depth and texture to that Columbia Pike facade. Swinging around to a view from the, I keep mixing up my east and west, from the east side looking west. So this is that side alley here, and you can see the residential entrance. So whereas on the opposite corner, you know, we kind of kept the facade for the retail as more prominent and stepped the building above back, we've created more of a tower element on this corner to help mark that residential entrance and draw visitors to the residential project to that corner.
In this perspective and the other, I'm just going to add into this, oh, the next one too, the folded plane that you see on the top of the building as it hits the sky, as Tess had pointed out, we pulled that down and used that element at the ground plane to get these, you know, more depth out of the facade and set the building back for, you know, functional outdoor spaces. But the intent of it too was to take a major cue from this Art Moderne historic architecture, which chose to twist the building so that it's not orthogonal to Columbia Pike. It's on an angle. So we're sort of playing on those cues to replicate it in our facade so that it blends into it. So go to the next perspective, and it really shows it a little bit better from up above.
Yeah, and so here you can see in the historic, you know, that angled movement on the storefronts, which is done in kind of a more minor way, and then we're just scaling that move up. So taking a lot of cues from the Art Moderne. Also, so this portion of streetscape here is a future bus stop, so that's why there isn't any trees in this location. And so, you know, using that pushback in the building to provide some sort of green space in front of the residential amenities space.
And you can see the twisted mass on the existing historic front too. That's on that little part, yeah.
So this is just a more street level view of that same corner. And then kind of swinging down to mid-block, looking at how the historic facades will be sitting in with the new facade for the retail, and how that starts to create these nice little pockets of outdoor space that definitely during COVID times we all appreciate for outdoor seating. And again, in the updates we've made to the retail, it allows all the retail to be on just 2 levels, and so that they can be combined to either be 2 larger retails or many smaller retails. Swinging around the building on Barton Street. This is the corner with our neighbors at Arlington Village, that same red brick wall that was previously approved, and looking down the alleyway, we've added balconies to all the rear facing units to help break up this facade as well. And then a view looking from that rear corner of the lot where we've extended the parking over the resident outdoor area, kind of back towards the building. So you can start to see how the planting and stuff coming into that outdoor area will kind of help buffer and create a nice transition from the neighborhoods behind. So hopefully that gets you all a good overview of, you know, all the improvements we've made in the design. And so through our iterations and in all of our discussions with the county, we've come to a point where we have a few form-based code modifications. So the previous approval was done with 5 form-based code modifications. 3 of these 5 elements have actually been removed from the form-based code since the initial approval. The form-based code has gone through several iterations of refinements and changes. So the previously approved were the finished floor elevation of the ground floor retail, siding specifications, cornice requirements, maximum window size, and exterior door materials. The two modifications we would like to maintain are the finished floor elevation of the ground floor retail and the siding specifications. And then we are also asking for modifications to the facade composition, window configuration, and shop front configurations. So we'll look into those in more detail. For that first modification, looking at the plan of the previously approved, that modification of the elevation of the ground floor retail was to allow the retail to be outside of the 6 to 24 inches above the sidewalk. And that's for this portion of the sidewalk down here in yellow, previously approved with this raised portion and the stairs that allow side entrances to retail 1, even though the sidewalk has steps down in grade considerably as it wraps around Barton Street. So we saw this in the elevations earlier, and we'll be maintaining the same condition that was previously approved, and we're not asking for any changes to that. The next modification was the siding specification for the Main Street BES RBL setback. So there are requirements to maintain not less than 75% of the building at the RBL on the ground story, and then 60% on the upper story. So previously the whole upper story had been set back 6 to 10 feet, and that modification was granted. We're asking our upper story is set back 3 to 6 feet. So it's a much less of a modification there, but then at the ground floor, we also set back 3 to 6 feet. So this is looking at that ground floor plan. Again, we don't have 70% of the facade hitting the RBL, but we think that that was a very important move to pull away from the RBL, to kind of take that art modern gesture that we were grabbing from the historic facades with the angles and have the folds along the major facade of the building. The next modification that we're asking for is facade composition. We believe we are very close to all these requirements and that we definitely meet the intent of the facade composition requirements, but in keeping with the art modern style of the historic facade, we don't necessarily follow all the strict requirements to the T. For example, the complete discrete vertical facade composition, having no pieces of facade less than 25 feet. Depending on how you want to break down our facade, we might have some pieces that are less than that. Our bays, since they are shorter so that that top cornice line follows the folds, they do not run the full vertical height. So sorry, these are the bays here, and they don't meet the top. Some of these bays are narrower than 25 feet. We have a variety of types of fenestration without, but there isn't different types per discrete facade. And we use a variety of wall materials, but again, they're not completely separated by each discrete facade type. The next modification we're asking for is the window configuration. The form-based code specifies that all windows should be vertically proportioned. Again, tying into our design reference of the historic facade, we felt like having the horizontal orientation was a key part of the design. and talking to current window manufacturers, for longevity of the windows, they work better with the internal muttons, even though here in the code it specifically specifies they should be exterior. So that would be these little vertical pieces here within the frames of the windows, and then 40% window glass per story. Oh, sorry, that one's in blue. Yeah, we're meeting that. And then the fifth proposed modification is the storefront configuration. So this modification is for the requirement of the base of the storefront. It says the bottom of the storefront window shall be 1 to 3 feet above the adjacent fronting clear sidewalk. So that would mean this would be solid here where you see windows coming down to meet the sidewalk at grade. We thought since the historic facade has lifted storefront, we thought it was important to kind of set a rhythm between the new and old, and we would like our storefront to go all the way down to grade wherever possible. And we have kind of that water line marked with mullion for our storefront windows. So hopefully I clearly kind of and quickly explained all of those modifications that we're seeking, and clearly explained the updates that we've made since the last previously approved project.
Tess, wonderful presentation, excellent. And the only thing I do want to follow up before we get into questions out there that we may have is, if my memory is correct, you all have been to our friends at the Historical Affairs and Landmark Review Board. Is that correct?
That is correct. We got our what do they call it, certificate last month, a couple weeks ago.
They took their holy water and they sprinkled it all over you. That is wonderful news. So
Yes.
We feel blessed.
Yeah,
It was,
you should feel. Our colleagues, I know Commissioner Sarley's with us. He's an ex Historical Affairs and Landmark Review Board. I know as architects, you guys, it is a very rigorous review. So I'm glad to know you've gone through there. Colleagues on the OG, questions out there? Let's put our hands up if you can. It's that little hand symbol if you see it. If not, unmute yourself and I'll try to do it. And if you're on the phone, just *6 us and just jump in there so that I don't forget you, because it's hard to see. All right. We're gonna go down here. I've got Keith has got his hands raised. Linda, Juliet, Betty, Steph. Wait, I'll call you guys. I'll call you. Just get everybody get your hands up so we can work our way through. All right, let's go. Keith, I'm gonna let you go first. Keith, I don't think, Keith, your audio's not on, and when it does come on, it's kind of hard. Keith, it sounds like you've taken a balloon of helium and.
Keith, you don't look like a cat, but you sound like a cat.
Yeah, Keith, we can barely hear you, and it sounds like you. Maybe, Keith, why don't you log off and log back on if you don't mind? I think something's going on with the connection. All right, we'll wait for Keith to get back on. Linda, I see you next on my list.
Okay.
Linda, go.
Yep. I've got 3 questions. If we can start with the north, stay on this slide, page 39. That might be the best one, although slide 20. Can you please, we had a great deal of discussion about this northwest corner where we had big concerns about the safety of being able to get down the steps for folks with low vision, etc. Can you spend a little detail about the actual stepping down and the corner and railing presence, etc., for people getting off the entrance to the retail areas and then stepping down to the sidewalk? From a safety standpoint, we spent an awful lot of time on this 6 years ago. If you guys can talk about that, about what has or has not changed and how you're accommodating railings, et cetera. Thank you.
Linda, thanks for bringing back that trauma. I do remember it too.
Yep.
All right, Tess.
Yeah, so the one thing that we did change about that condition is we've actually, I'm sorry, I can zoom in here.
It might be better to use one of the ones that actually show from the out. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know that the artistic rendering really shows the railing well, and I understand from the safety perspective that's definitely key. And so the previous design had a stair that wrapped the corner,
Right.
and we had the same concern. We understand, it looks nice and functional, but there could be mobility challenges to having, a single step or two steps, and having them wrap a corner in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a tripping hazard. We like it as architects because it makes a very cool corner, and you don't have a railing blocking the, it's just another obstruction. But I think we think it really is kind of dangerous, and so we're putting a railing there.
Okay.
And Tess and Chris, this is Connie, if I may add, in terms of safety around this corner, there's a light right next to it. So with the additional sort of a simplified design, in this case, we felt that we have adequately addressed the elevation change here with this current design.
Okay.
Linda, that
Please.
answer?
Yeah.
Looks like we got rid of the fancy architect stairs and got realistic ones put in.
Yeah, even though the other ones look nicer from an architectural standpoint, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Yeah,
safety first.
diminishing steps usually it doesn't work as well because people tend to miss that elevation change pretty easily.
Yep.
Connie, you're bringing back real bad memories now.
Yep.
We this was an hour of conversation. Linda, 2 more to go.
All right.
Well, I'm fortunately I wasn't involved with the previous design.
Well,
so I can claim that it was
so
not our belief to do diminish. We try to avoid diminishing steps as much as possible. Just look at the practicality of how it works in real world.
Well, Connie, it looks like you missed our conversation, but knew what we would get to and beat us to the punch this time. So great job.
Great.
Linda.
Okay.
Yeah, that light is 20 feet away. I just looked it up. So it should provide a lot of lighting in that area.
Okay, the railing is the bigger issue, so that's great. Next question, probably slide 18, I think. The south side of the property, bordering Arlington Village. Just wanted to confirm, this was also a lot of discussion. For the vehicles are coming in and out of this back side, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in terms of at night, headlights from cars coming and going vis-a-vis the folks who live in the first building of Arlington Village, can you guys go over what the heights of the fencing are and anything that we should be aware of, refreshing our memories in terms of trying to be a really good neighbor to the folks who live in that first building of Arlington Village?
Definitely. So the garage entrance is right down here. So it's almost past the corner of the property, kind of half past it. But if we want to take a closer look, we included, so these are the elevations of the fence from the previously approved drawings, and we aren't proposing to change that. It does have the slots through the fence, which I suppose could, if you had someone pulling straight in or straight out to the parking spaces, could get some light coming through. But as far as the headlights level, they would definitely be far below the fence. The fence is 7 foot at the shortest point, and then as the grade drops, it gets to be 8'8", and then steps down. So at a minimum,
it's a wall rather than a fence. I mean, it's all
right.
It's 95% solid.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. We're just concerned in various projects in terms of being good neighbors to the existing residents for night nighttime, especially. So things that aren't at all obvious during the day are real obvious at night. So
Yeah, and
there are
Linda,
still people.
Since it's a wall too, it'll add a lot of acoustic
Yes.
separation too. So,
Okay. Okay, so the dimensions haven't changed. The width of the alley hasn't changed.
no.
Okay, all right.
And we thought this was important since there had been a lot of thought put into this, and it was actually a part of the agreement, I think, with the easement that was created.
Sure.
On the property, that we wanted to abide by that agreement.
Sure. Okay. All right. My last question, the outlot at the southeast corner, probably slide 28 or slide 11. Can you so this is there's nothing underneath this. This is on top of the ground. There's nothing underneath this, and
Correct.
The folks that are parking, can you explain, I guess, can you go back to the other one showing a car parked there, which I believe is 28.
Connie, maybe you can talk about the impervious pavement here and the design.
Right.
Right.
So who will be allowed to park there?
I believe these additional parking spaces are intended for retail visitors.
Correct.
Okay.
And we've worked with the DES folks extensively. As you know, the regulation in Arlington County is pretty strict when it comes to treatment of runoff. And what the DES folks told the team to do is to specify permeable paving here in this outlot area. And on top of that, there is a treatment tank below the parking surface.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay.
Well, Travis is online. Is there anything? I'm trying to interpret your design, Travis.
Yeah, so this is Travis Brown with Walter L. Phillips, the civil engineer. The parking spaces and the drivable area in the outlot is permeable pavement. Below the permeable pavement is a storage tank, which will provide detention to regulate flow from exiting the property. And then also in the outlot is a urban bioretention planter, which is the large green area on the lower portion of the page, which will provide treatment from roof area that's going to be piped to that location. It will also be detained in that storage tank once it's treated. So there's sort of a comprehensive stormwater management system here, in addition to the parking area and the open space.
Okay, so staying on this slide, everything that we see is permeable pavers. Those are areas where people can park?
Correct.
That is correct.
So is it actually going to, oh, there we go. So it is marked up for actual parking spaces. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Linda, I feel like you're planning your next trip to Starbucks now, but you know.
I'm not a coffee drinker. I don't go to Starbucks.
I don't drink coffee either, but they do tea.
And I'm not that much of a tea drinker either, believe it or not.
All right, Linda. Did we get them all?
Okay. So those are individual parking spaces. Okay. And there is no access to the east side. Everybody's coming in down the pike, down the side there, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
They can come off Barton, off the rear alley, or off the pike, off the side alley.
Okay. Barton, there is a connection to Barton. The rear alley runs all the way over to Barton, so vehicles can enter from Barton. Oh, okay. Okay. It has been 6 years. Okay.
No problem. And this site does have a lot of grade across it. So even though there is not really much of a retaining happening at the wall here, we're mostly following the grade down. We are we end up a full level below our retail, so we can go in the parking here. So that's a little confusing if you haven't looked at these plans much, to kind of be partially below ground. But this isn't nearly the most grade that you have on a Columbia Pike site. So.
Oh yes, we know. We know. So the parking spaces are intended for retail. Are any of them assigned to residents, or are they strictly come and go for retail?
All assigned resident parking will be within the secured garage.
Okay, all right.
And so there's some resident visitor parking spaces. You're required 1/8 of a space per unit. And then some resident visitor spaces are outside the secured. So those will be marked.
Okay. And how big is the grassy area where you guys intend to have some tables set up? Is that open to the public? Is that for residents? What's the square footage roughly? Yeah, there we go. Yep.
I think it's about 3,000 square feet. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Connie. There is an open space requirement, OCLA, open contiguous lot area, and we meet that by a few extra square feet.
Good for you. OCLA was by far the most difficult single subject we ever dealt with on the entire form-based code. I still have scar tissue from that one. And that was, I don't know how many years ago.
Yeah, and so we're showing this as a gated area right now for resident use.
For resident use. And then is it just fencing on the south and on the west sides of the grassy area? What kind of endpoint is it? Is it fencing?
Yeah, Tess, I guess you have a perspective for this area. If you can bring that up, it's much easier to explain.
So, there we go. Okay.
In the back, along the property line, it's a 7-foot high fence, along with some additional landscaping in the front.
Okay.
But in the front, as well as on the north side of this okra area, it's only 4 feet high.
Okay,
so
and this is
here by the parking.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
And it's transparent, so you can see what's happening. It will be a solid fence.
Yeah.
Okay.
To echo what Tess said earlier, the okra is about 1,400 square foot, but this whole sort of highlighted green area, it's approximately 4,000 square foot.
Okay. All right. That answers all of my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Looks like we have Keith joined us back on, so I'm gonna let Keith go first, then Juliet. Keith, are you able to?
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Wonderful, Keith.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. Okay.
I wish you could have heard yourself earlier. It was kind of interesting.
Okay. First of all, I don't know how much, I hope if I'm asking something that's already been asked, just let me know. I just wanted to bring up that I really admire that you're trying to emphasize the historic, the art moderne facades on the retail, and if anything, I'd like to see that more emphasized. But I have a quick question for you. Are there any retail tenants that have already been identified?
This is Yao, the owner's team. We haven't signed any agreement, but we are in discussion with various kind of retailers at this time.
Reason I'm asking, I know this has happened in quite a few of the other new developments, is that where they have space for numerous retail, that they decided to go and just have one large vendor come in as a grocery store, just basically take up all the retail space. And I'm just curious, because since you have moved the lobby to the corner to allow more continuous retail, I was just wondering if that was one of the drivers to that, because you had a vendor that wanted to use all the space. And I'm looking at it with respect, and this is obviously our next conversation after this about the commercial spaces, is the idea is to have as many diverse retail places in there instead of just having one tenant occupy all the retail space. So, I mean, that's fine that you give them, the idea is to get more flexibility as possible, and I appreciate that.
Right, yeah. We try to be more flexible because we never know what's going to happen there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Another question I have,
Keith, I did want to stop you, and I do appreciate y'all, our owners rep showing up. Keith, just to be clear, I want to make sure so everyone does know, and applicant test, correct me if I'm wrong, the maximum consolidation is at this point 2 because of real physical limitations. I mean, theoretically, they could do more than 2, but there's real physical limitations at 2. Tess, am I correct on that one for Keith's knowledge? It's 5 bays at the moment, but 2 is
correct. There's 2 different distinct floor levels, and so and there's an egress path that separates them that's required, so they can't be combined.
It's kind of like the Home Depot in Falls Church, Keith. If you try to do, join 2, you'd be building a giant, runway ramp inside.
Right.
To be clear, we've studied it to have multiple.
I do have a question on
7.
Yeah.
We studied it to have as many as 7 different vendors or 7 different retailers.
So as few as 2 or as many as 7, Keith. Mic check, everyone. Kiao, a few others. We have
kids.
Mic checks. We got our kids out there. We all love kids. Mine have yet to join us, and I really had a good over/under on them. So,
Yeah.
Yao, I think it's you, sir. And a mic check. Thank you, sir. All right, Keith.
Okay. I'll just tell them to
go.
I have a question concerning the balconies. I noticed there's like just rough count. Looks like there's like 30 some odd balconies facing Columbia Pike, if not more. Is there anything? I went by Columbia Pike again just to look that maybe there's like in Penrose there might be one building has like 5. I'm just worried about so many balconies that once it's occupied, and those balconies look large enough that people can start putting stuff in there like grills and chairs and blankets and umbrellas and whatever, that I'm just wondering what the idea is to have, if it's anything in the code or not, about having so many balconies facing Columbia Pike. On the rear facade, I think it's great, but facing Columbia Pike, I have a problem with having so many open balconies like that.
Yeah, that'll be policed. That's going to be policed by the policies of building. They can't use them as storage units, and bikes and the rest of it. There's going to be some strict rules about that.
Okay.
I think grill is going to be strictly prohibited as well. And I'm pretty sure that you can see a lot of balconies on the building, on the north side, the Penrose Square. They have some similar layout as ours. I don't see too many people just putting their trash on the balconies.
Yeah. Well, I think just because of how it's set, that theirs are more set back, so it's more difficult to see what's on the balcony than this configuration looks like. Obviously, I'm just looking at the illustrator's view of that, but it just seems that there's so many, and that because the whole building is sort of straight across, it just emphasizes the balconies more than anything else.
Yeah, they're primarily recessed except for the end corner that we were looking at, the western front. Yeah, there, right there.
Matt, I think Matt wants to chime in on this. Matt, I see your hand up. 1 second, everyone.
Yep.
Matt, help us out.
I wanted to add an element which I think is kind of beneath the surface, but a very critical one. For this site to move forward, the preservation of the facades requires a conditional certificate of appropriateness from that historical review board to be issued first. In order for that to happen, we have to come to a really good place for folks that are on that board to review and accept the facades as they are proposed. So even a shift in any of the balconies or removing a few would start the whole process again, because we're simply triggering that even by adding like a small antenna on the building. Like any minor change to the facade brings us right back to that group. So I did want to highlight that in terms of the overall process, but also I think something Keith mentioned, their form-based code is silent on balconies in terms of an amount that's required, a minimum or maximum, or whether or not they could face an arterial like Columbia Pike. So we just kind of stay away from that element and kind of let the market dictate it. And then just rely on other elements to kind of monitor that and highlight if there's any issues.
And Keith, I will say in our other areas, our other major planning areas, it is becoming an increasing trend that we're seeing a lot of balconies on what we would consider major streets. If you notice on 574 Flats, going up Glebe now towards 66. A lot of balconies are out there looking right on Glebe. You know, it's the market is dictating what's out there, and I don't think that our applicants out there trying to build a building that won't lease. So it's out there really. It's really something that's out there right now. Keith, other questions?
Okay. Nope, I guess that's it.
Okay. All right, Juliet. And
Yes.
Betty?
Yes, Juliet. Just to remind everybody, because it's a lot of names and faces, I'm representing Columbia Heights Civic Association, and that is the location of this project. I want to congratulate the architects and everyone who's worked on the design. I think this is a big improvement over the prior project. I really like the way that you've done the work on the front to sort of echo the Art Moderne elements. I personally really love balconies, and I have no problem with balconies, and I think that balconies are great, and that there's always rules with the apartment buildings, safety rules with balconies. I'm not concerned about that at all. My biggest concern is around the timing of this and making sure that there's adequate time for Arlington Village to review the project. It sounds like there haven't been any alterations to the setbacks or the heights or the fencing or wall in the rear, with the exception of the retail parking. And so I want to focus on that with my question, the Oakless space and the retail parking in the rear. I would say it seems to me a little bit of a contradiction to have people going into the rear and parking next to that Oakless space, but not making that publicly accessible. So I would welcome a discussion about that. And I'm also wondering about the visibility of those parking spaces to the rear neighbors and how that's going to impact them. And I'd like to understand the landscape plan for that Oakla area in terms of what kinds of trees are going to be planted there. Are you going to have some canopy trees in there that can provide a lot of shade and green as a buffer?
I'm going to let our applicant answer this, Juliet, and I will tell you, if they miss a chance for canopy trees on a place above a garage, we will make sure that gets fixed real quick. But I'm sure those landscape architects didn't miss that one on there. Tess, do you want to lead off? I think it's important, if you don't mind. I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there, but let's also make sure we really do address. We've talked a lot in our last time about the wall in the retail parking, but what is it? What can the neighbors there expect as the perimeter of those parking spaces?
Yeah, so as Connie said, and maybe here the rendering shows it better, it'll be after the wall ends, it will turn to a 7-foot wood fence continuing around the rear sides of the property. So that wood fence will come along here and then this side and continue up. And then so our east neighbor is a gas station currently, and as proposed in the previous plan, there will be a retaining wall along that gas station property as this ramp slopes down to meet grade here. There's currently retention of their property kind of with some small outbuildings, but that will be replaced by a proper retaining wall. And so from the previous approval, that kind of ended here because the outlot wasn't included. But in our proposal, that retaining wall will turn along the rear of that property and will kind of die out as the grades equalize right around this point, I think. And so we'll turn back into a wood fence. On top of the retaining wall portion on that property, there will be a metal guardrail.
Tess, we know you don't live on the Pike, but that's a different story. Well, that's okay. There's something a little bit more important than the gas station there, but it's okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. What am I missing?
Bob and Edith, but it's okay.
Oh, well, we need a direct connection.
Don't worry, the residents will make one without your need.
We're gonna put a ladder on the retaining wall so that no one.
They will in the middle of the night. Don't you worry about that. Juliet, other questions? Can we, the landscape architects, can we talk for a second, please, and highlight some of the plans?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Connie.
Be happy to address some of the other questions. Julia, you asked about what the neighbor feels about this outlot being the parking lot. As Tess said earlier, on the west side, the Arlington apartments, it's buffered by this okra area, which is densely planted. And on top of that, we are having a 7-foot fence separating the two property. On the south side of the outlot, it's currently an open green space. So the next building is the Berkeley condominium. And if you look at the Google area view, the condominium is not right butting against our outlot. It is their parking garage that is actually more visible to this outlot. On the east side of the outlot is currently a group of heavily densely planted naturalized area that, like Tess said earlier, the property the owner intend to build a retaining wall to transition the grades. So the intent there is to preserve that existing wooded buffer between the Berkeley condominium and this new outlet. Did I answer your question, Julia?
Connie, some of the plants, some of the varieties that would typically be chosen for our native medium shade trees as you represent in your plans, what can we expect? What would be some of the varieties?
Within the okra area, we have identified some seeding zone, which is located more towards the north part of that green space. And we've identified honey locust, a small-leaved, medium-sized shade tree as appropriate for this kind of function. Within the bioretention area, we are choosing the wet-tolerant native plants like the birches, as well as some chinensis. Another understory tree as a major understory for that area. And obviously the area will be covered with additional perennials and ground cover to meet the bioretention requirements.
Juliet, more questions?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that there were going to be some fall canopy trees planted in the area. And then, you know, I just want to make sure that Arlington Village, which I believe there are some representatives here in the meeting tonight, have an opportunity to ask some questions about the project, and then also understanding what is the time frame. I don't have concerns about the facade. I would not like to see this have to go back to HLRB, but I do want to make sure that Arlington Village has an opportunity to have all of their questions answered.
Before I saw Matt's hand up, because I was realizing as I asked you, I just wanted to make sure Matt has a chance. I think he's got some slides on what the next steps look like. Matt or Ebony, I see your hand come out. You can't pull it down now.
All right, let me see. Can you see my screen now?
We can. Thank you.
All right. So this is a simplified version of the overall process we applied for form-based code applications, but it does, I think, at a high level, gives you a sense of what's happened so far, where we are today, and what's still ahead of us. So, you know, in the fall of last year, this first column was really underway, where the filing was initially made and multiple rounds of review took place between the applicant and staff. During that window, we've also started to check in with the Historical Review Board to make sure the facades were in good order. And only after that point, and compliance with the other standards was demonstrated, did we enter into the community review, which is this middle column. And you can see here, I highlighted tonight's meeting to verify form-based code compliance. This is kind of a tricky step because with the preservation of the facades, we are opening the door to a number of modifications that are needed to get the other requirement, the conditional COA for the facades. So one kind of informs the other and makes this more of a unique review than most form-based code applications where we can just kind of run through the checklist and everything has to be a yes. This is not one of those. But I did want to bring this up because after tonight's meeting, these applications do establish a meeting with the Impacted Civic Association, which you can see here. and kind of present the same material really to a broader audience. And I think that's a much more open flowing conversation about any clarifying questions, what to expect, what's changed. So this is still ahead of us, and I would anticipate the applicant will be looking at potential dates over the next few weeks. Once that takes place, we enter into the final column here, which because this is a use permit amendment, we're going to be identifying public hearings, which are in this section here, which include the Planning Commission and the County Board. So we anticipate that will likely happen in the springtime. But we haven't identified specific dates yet. And once that happens, we'll definitely pass those along.
So just really quickly then, I wanted to recognize that just for purposes of moving forward and knowing who's who, Ann Coughlin, I believe, is here for Arlington Village. I don't know what the timing is. David, you're running the meeting. But I didn't want to lose in the mix this idea that maybe if you're putting the Okla next to the retail space, you might want to open that up for public use. Just throwing that out there as a discussion point.
It's a good point, Juliet. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar, so as Matt's already clearly laid out, we do not vote in any of our OGs or site plans or any other things on anything. We try to, I try my best to consolidate your many and various points that get moved, and then try to summarize them to my fellow commissioners in the public record. That record will then also be reflected within this meeting minutes that go forward to the county board, which ultimately reviews this action. We have two more of our OG members I see with hands raised, Betty and then Steph. And then Reggie and Ann, I know you guys have questions, and I definitely want to get to them since we have time, and I hope people can hold on. So Betty?
Sure. These should be quick. I have 4 things. So one, I'm curious about the sidewalk width, especially if we're going to put in sidewalk dining options, just to make sure we've got clear paths of travel between dining, walking, pedestrian clear paths. That's one. Where that bus stop is that going to be a super stop? Because will that change the elevation of the sidewalk? 2, where is the trash pickup? In other words, where are the dumpsters? Okay. And that was 3. And 4, how do you get from that outside parking lot to the front of the building? And is it wheelchair accessible?
Okay,
I will now
thank you.
go on Mike.
Let's go with easy ones first, Tess. Yeah, let's go with where's the dumpsters?
Dumpsters are in the loading dock area. There'll be a retail trash room and then a residential trash room that services a residential trash chute that comes down from above. And so that pickup can be within the loading dock. It's a very high 2-story space so that every pickup and everything can happen within.
Okay. Tess, let's show someone how they get out. Our handicap parking spots, have you guys identified where they'll be?
Yes, so there's some within the building for residents and then some in the surface parking facility. We have one here, and then one that's kind of tucked under the building here. I'm not sure if this landscape plan is the easiest one to look at, but so if you are visiting a resident, there is a door here into this residential elevator lobby. So if you had a key card to access that, you can come directly in, though most residents wouldn't be surface parking, but still accessibility. And then there is a retail elevator located here, so you could come in, there's a door, and come up the retail elevator and come out this access point where you're in between retail 1 and retail 2. So from the Columbia Pike streetscape, you can decide which retail you're trying to enter. The grade along the alleyway is not over 5%, so you could come out and around is also an option. I know there's also an internal stair here that can be used for retail tenants to come up and then use the centralized corridor. But we do envision a lot of tenants, people usually walk out the way they drove in. So walking out around to their preferred retail location.
Yep. Well, they were talking earlier about looking for walls to paint on earlier in the meeting. So, and Commissioner Ciotti would always point out you'll have the buttons for accessing the doors, the push buttons for it, since they'll have a handicap spot right there. So just as a reminder. Yep.
And
Now-
and the nice thing about that entrance is that's below the building above, so it's a covered entryway to get in through that.
And Matt read my mind. I was about to go.
It's one floor below, so
yeah,
perfect. Right. Yeah.
I do want to provide the dimensions for the streetscape. She asked about the dimensions earlier.
Yep. One second, Connie. I'm gonna hold you off because I just want to make sure before you go, we'll get to all the dimensions because you could probably like go with it. Matt, I saw his screen come on, so I know he wants to tell us about whether they meet the clear width standards, which was one of Betty's questions, I presume is why his video came on.
They do, and I think I'm going to let them handle the dimensions. I just wanted to flag the transit station question, which I think was just mentioned. That has not changed since the original approval. We intentionally, as part of that process, had to shift it as far east as we could because of the elevated sidewalk that they will require. And that sidewalk elevation could not otherwise happen near the historic facades, which otherwise would have created kind of like a negative backflow and flooding issues. So that station remains exactly where it was in 2016.
Okay, Connie, some of our dimensions, some of our narrow pinch points, please.
In the shade over here, if you flip over to the color rendering, it's probably easier to see the different zones. The site plan color rendering.
Yeah, let me go back to this.
Don't use site plan around here, Connie. That's a horrible word on this part of Arlington County.
Well, you're making it really fun here, Stephen.
Is this the one we were looking for?
Yeah,
correct. If you don't mind zooming a little bit, Tess, so we can see the different shades here. The cool gray shade to the back of the curb is what they consider the streetscape zone, and that's 8 foot wide. The lighter creamy color is what they call the clear sidewalk zone, and that's 6 foot wide. And the darker creamy color is in front of the building and is considered as retail space or potential retail space should anyone decide to bring some tables and chairs outside. If you move to the left along Barton Street, it's 6 foot tree zone, 6 foot sidewalk, and then the remainder would be considered as retail outdoor space, which include that elevated seating zone.
Betty, did that get all your questions?
It did. I just want to have Linda Dye check my memory, but weren't we asking for 10-foot clear pathways and sidewalks?
Linda, flash us back.
I'm drawing a blank on 10 feet. It took a lot of work to get consistent 6 feet.
All right, 6
feet. A lot
yeah.
of areas, consistent 6 feet, and nothing intruding in that 6 feet. So
okay.
there are areas where there is enough room to have more clear space, but I do not recall any requirement for 10 feet.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
As long as we get at least the 6 feet clear with no protrusions or intrusions, that's great.
Yeah, that light creamy zone there, Betty, running the whole length on each side is always clear, open, no matter what. Can't have any seats or chairs or umbrellas or gates or anything. So, all right. Now we have Steph. You're gonna be our last OG member. Then we'll get to Reggie and Ann to close us out. We'll do some public comments. Steph.
Okay. So quite a few, me being me. I did not see a signage plan in the extensive slide deck, the one that's the 56 pages. Do you have a signage plan to clarify like the public parking signs and how much is allowed for retail? And I've got a lot of them, so you want me to pause after each one or you want me to go through the list?
I prefer the pause.
Yeah, we'll pause.
I don't know if
let's actually, I'm going to rephrase your question a little differently, Steph. Matt, is there anything about this site that would remove the signage restrictions within the form-based code that's the OG should be aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. And since the 2017 amendment, we no longer have unique sign standards that apply for these projects. So the reference is only to Article 13.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, many of those really become known post-approval when certain tenants get identified. So at this point, it's really about the building address and any other, signage for like rear parking.
Steph, only because we could spend 10 hours on signs and we have.
No, I know, but and talking about where the public parking is, to clarify, to put the blue parking sign up on multiple locations, not just one, because trying to find this place for those who are not in the neighborhood might be difficult. So I would just request that you guys be very clear about where the public parking is accessible and how you can actually access it. The Okla area in the back, will that be allowed for the restaurant usage since you have two grease bays? So it looks like you're going to have at least 2 restaurants planned.
I'm going to leave that as a comment, Steph, and not as the applicant, because we've already identified yet another Okla consideration for them to go down that list. So I know that we've already plugged public access. You're plugging restaurant access. I think the applicant has probably heard us loud and clear.
Okay.
And I think let's move on just in the interest of time, and we do have some other items I want to get to this evening.
So the other one is the planting. So I see that you have quite a few native plantings, but you still have some other external species. So I would highly, and this is not form-based code, but just a request, Plant Nova Natives is a website that offers multiple plantings that are usable for commercial spaces. So that's Plant Nova Natives. Because I know I'm seeing a lot of junipers and stuff, and we already are losing a lot of green space along Columbia Pike. So consider something that's more critter friendly. Also not form-based code, but because we require clear glass, but a consideration please for bird strike windows. You can do that either with very faint films or other things. That was raised at our Penrose neighborhood meeting last night. A lot of concern with as much glass as we have on this, which is fantastic, and the balconies are fantastic too. I have family in Germany, and we're used to having balconies for everybody. Consider the bird strike glass. Arlington has a very heavy, very active Audubon group. Going back to the trash, loading trucks, I was not seeing the truck, how to get into the dumpsters and stuff, because I'm only seeing something that's 24 foot wide. You said it's high with 24 very high ceilings, but I was not seeing space for actual typical dumpsters. So are you going to have something other than dumpsters in that loading dock?
Tess, let's go back to the a slide if we can, and again highlight the loading dock area and the height and where the dumpsters will be placed.
Yep. So this plan here should be a little bit clearer, and it shows these dashed lines here are the 25-foot trucks, and so we have a 35-foot clear interior space. So the dumpsters, 2-yard dumpsters, could be placed behind the trucks. And,
okay, so that's not a raised loading dock, like expecting, like how you would pull in a truck and then back it up, that you could load on a flat surface?
Correct. Yeah, we're not planning for
not
a raised loading dock at this location.
Okay, so that explains that.
And
so
it's a 2-story height one, correct, Tess?
Correct.
Or yeah.
Okay. Will it have a door to help reduce noise?
Yes, there'll be an overhead door that will be, I think that's one of the standard site plan conditions about, that being closed most times and this and that. No.
Okay.
I'm going to start a carrier rule, like with 50 cents every time someone says site plan in my form-based code.
Form-based code condition.
Okay.
And then there is a switch over to, it seemed like significantly smaller apartments at 645 square foot for some of the 1-bedrooms. So there's smaller side of studios. So is that a consideration even after COVID? Would you guys consider making slightly larger apartments?
I'm actually going to stop you right. I'm going to hold that one because I don't want the applicant to respond that one, Steph, because I think it's important for us all to remember that
I know form-based code is on the outside.
Well, it's
this
also
is an inside question.
But I hear you, but I also think it's important for us to remember that, more units get created sometimes with smaller things, and there's many different markets and many different income levels and many different opportunities, and the more variety sometimes the better. So because they can change it post approval. That's important to remember with respect to that.
Okay.
To
that
this
is
question.
that was part of the reason why I was asking, was that 645 decision pre-pandemic or post-pandemic? That was how I was getting that in there.
And they could always change it later on, you know, until it's built and the 2x4 studs are up. It's always going to be a variety choice there, as long as they can meet the other parking and other things that will hit you from that.
Okay. And then just to double check, this is all rental, correct? Not condo?
Well, let's ask. Matt Allman, you want to speak, or does the applicant want to just go? Is the intention at the moment condos, or are we looking at apartments?
We are actually keeping both options at this time.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
If you can't tell, some of us have been pushing for condos for a while. And then the balconies, this again, not necessarily form-based code, but from consideration from some of the neighbors and the green activities, to consider and be explicit about what type of planting is allowed. So if somebody does want to make a garden out of their balcony on Columbia Pike, I think it would be beautiful, and that's what I'm used to in Europe. So consider helping residents identify how they can do that legally without bonking somebody on the head with the plant falling over. I think I got all my stuff.
You got stuff? Okay. That I'm going to go down the public comment. And if we get an Arlington Now article when this is built about a pot falling up from a balcony, I know who I'm going after, Steph.
Hey, we do it all the time in Europe. Just think about how beautiful all those balconies are when you go through Germantown. So
I've been to Naples. Okay. Trust me. All right, Reggie, you going to go up with our first public comment?
It's been covered, but I phase in and out of my attention span, so I just wanted to review it. And predictably, it has to do with the screening in the on the Arlington Village side. So my understanding is that the fence here that's brick, isn't that correct? Or is it?
Yes.
Correct. Well, it says here, split face concrete block, 3-color blend, 8-inch high by 16-inch long. So that dimension is actually closer to CMU, or what you would consider like a cinder block dimension, than a brick dimension.
All right. So it's a concrete block. And is it as colored as it appears in the drawings? Is it going to have some kind of color like that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Rappahannock red, Williamsburg red, burnt umber.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that. And so the outdoor public area and the parking area on the south side are going to be completely screened from the adjacent Arlington Village properties.
Correct. And those will have a 7-foot wooden fence.
Oh, okay. So that lower section on the on the cross section there is wooden.
Correct. So where the alleyways immediately adjacent to the property line, it's the block wall to help with the noise mitigation and be a more solid separation. But since there'll be planting and outdoor seating here, we're proposing a wooden fence.
Okay. All right. I guess that's that sounds fine. I mean, is it for some particular reason, just to save money, or it just isn't necessary to have concrete block all the way around? Or it's just less of
all the above could be the answer, Reggie, in life.
Correct. All the above. Less expensive. We don't feel that it's necessary. And maybe you want to peek through the wood fence and see our plantings because they're so beautiful.
I was gonna say they're gonna have a manicured yard.
right
over there.
And the suggested greenery along in the diagram, is that suggesting some kind of trellis type landscaping might be included along the fence there?
You know, someone who was involved in the original process would have to answer that question. I've had the same question in my mind, whether that was something that was previously agreed upon, because this is an image taken from the 2016 approval.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that's an artistic, element saying you guys, can plant something nice that'll grow up on your side, or if that was something that was negotiated at the time.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it's going to be solid enough.
Part of that great compromise back in 2016.
In terms
of
Well, I just want to pass my comments along. It's a great project. I really like the the facades, the varying textures and colors, and the Art Moderne and all of that. I think it's well thought out. These revisions are very suitable. And the screening, I'm completely pleased with as far as Arlington Village is concerned. Okay, that concludes me.
Thanks, Reggie. And I know
Thank
Tess
you.
and Chris probably like hearing it because I too, I think they did a great job with it. Anne, have public comment from you as well, please.
Yes, thank you so much for letting me speak. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you great.
Great, thank you. I'm with Arlington Village, as you know, and I was on their board for quite a while. Just got off the board this past November, and so I've had a long history with working with the original developers on this project. And thank you for, you know, I figured you probably would keep the screening in the back, the wall, because I know we worked on that ad infinitum with the previous owner, and so that's been well worked out. I just have a few questions. Most of them I think have been really answered. I think we'd probably like to at some point talk over the 7-foot fence. And I also, before I go on, want to thank all of the other people that have asked questions, because it just warmed my heart to see how much you cared about Arlington Village and the building behind. So thank you very much for your caring.
Oh, the Pike sticks together, and we sit through it for all of ourselves. Our group of Pike. Our team of OG neighbors you have are representing every civic association up and down the Pike. Trust me, it's one for all and all for one. We're like the Three Musketeers out there. I have to explain.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Three Musketeers. Okay.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and we'll make sure to take that word back to the board that I'll be briefing. I am interested. I'm a little surprised, and this is, you know, for the developer. I would certainly hope, I know you're bound to talk to the civic associations, but I would encourage you also to contact Arlington Village, because we're certainly going to be looking at this and contacting our attorney and looking at some of the differences to make sure that the changes are not going to impact on us. And I was really surprised to find out that all this had started way back in the summer. And this is embarrassing, but we just found out about it yesterday. That's the first I had heard about any of this, or the board had heard about it. So please, I would urge you to contact us, and I'm not sure, or we could contact you if we could get an email address or something. But I think it's going to be really important as we go forth, since we're actually the main neighbor that will be involved. And it's not just the building behind us, because it's the building catty corner across and that whole Barton Street access. And right now, the traffic on Barton Street also. So there are things that we'd like to talk about. And of course, you know, we also have the document where we have the permanent easement that we've given you, so that, you know, that we've sold, so that you have the right, the access, the in and out access on the alleyway, as well as construction easements that we would probably need to talk about to make sure they were still set in place. So is it possible for somehow to work that out? Because I'd hate to go into asking all these questions here, because I don't think they're relevant. And I'm not sure if I don't think at this point that the form-based code requests are going to be an issue, but I'm not certain, and we'd like to check that out. So is there a way that we could arrange also for you to get together with us?
So Anne, I know that, so I'm going to keep this as public comment, if you don't mind.
Of course not.
I saw that Steph and Betty and Juliet's all got their hands up. So OG members, we do have other items on our agenda this evening. I do want to try to get to them.
Oh no, and this is why I don't want to go into any more questions or anything here. You know,
no, I think I think that the great thing is, guess what? We were joined this evening not only by the applicant themselves, the representatives with Mr. Yao, but you know, Matt's here as well from their agent. So I think your message was received, I'm sure, by both of them. And I suspect that your board members will probably get an email in the not too distant future. At least I would probably be doing that by tomorrow if I was on their side. But if you have any other anything else public comment wise that you want to get out there, because I like to make sure that we flush it out, Ann, because I always
No,
appreciate.
I think the only public comment that I have that I think, eventually has to be looked at is with the entrance and the egress on the alleyway, how that's going to impact traffic flow, because once you turn right onto Barton Street, you're almost right there at the light. There's only room for maybe 2 or 3 cars. So I would imagine that a number of cars would end up turning left and going, straight up Barton Street and trying to get around to Walter Reed or Glebe Road by another method. So that's just a general public comment.
It's a good comment, and I will flag that as an item to bring up at any public hearing that we have in the use permit to ensure that the queuing numbers haven't changed at that intersection with respect to the additional, I think, 20-ish parking spots they added with the outlot. So I think it's a good question, Ann. And I do appreciate you joining us this evening. I hope you've enjoyed our AUG meetings. We are a fun group, and as you could see, we do know each other quite well.
It's been interesting. Thank you.
Oh, great. Steph, Juliet, unless it's incredible, I see your hands up. I really do want to move on this evening, but I'm going to risk it. Steph, Juliet.
So this is Steph. This is just to clarify the easement discussion. So that little patch of ground, and this was brought up with the previous plan, that was exchanged for having the heavy duty brick fencing, was my understanding. So I just wanted to have that clarified on record. The easement was traded for the very beautiful heavy brick fence.
No, actually, you paid us for that.
Yeah. Let's guys, I know that we all have our individual expertise, and I do know it's out there, but remember, there are many parties involved in lots of transactions in the world. This party is, as Ann very nicely said, this is, our Three Musketeer group, where all 11 of our civic associations join and review a party, because, Ann, if it's not in your neighbors soon, the same code applies to my neighbors and to every single one of us. So we all suffer and endure the same rule set. That's the reason we all stick together so well, and why Linda keeps us accurate on to the history of it. But I do want to let that one sort of settle, Steph, and it is always, two neighbors have to always get along and figure out a way to work amongst themselves. And so, Ann, I think your comment is well placed, and I'm sure Matt has received it, and so Mr. Yao, who's on us this evening. And with that, unless I have anything else out there, I don't see any hands up there. Ann, I presume your hand is your answer is. Thank you. I want to thank Tess, the applicant, and staff for this presentation this evening. As we all saw from Matt's presentation, the next steps on this will be some outreach from the applicant to some more impacted civic associations and neighbors. And we look forward to seeing this in the coming months. The next opportunity for a public comment session on the county record, though, will come probably at the Planning Commission meeting that precedes the county board hearing, where again, public testimony would be received on major site or major. Oh, I just did it. You guys have tricked me. Major use plan amendments. With that, Tess, Chris, Matt, all of our applicant team, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, guys. And thanks for the thoughtful comments.
Ebony, I believe we still have ground story uses to go, and Mr. Rogers might have hung in there for us this whole evening. I hate to do this to us, but let's see if we can try to work through it. Sorry.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Sorry, Ebony, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm putting my contact info in the meeting chat for anyone who has questions, and then we can connect directly with civic associations in Arlington Village as well. So thanks again.
So Matt broke my rule. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that.
All right. So if we are ready, tonight, Mark McCauley from Economic Development is here with me. We're going to quickly go through the ground story uses review, which was drafted by a collaboration between planning and economic development staff. So starting with an overview of the anticipated process that includes community stakeholder outreach and engagement, Mark will then provide some context of the study's origin and purpose, and then I'll go get back into the specifics of the scoped items before we hear from you in a Q&A if we still have time. So over the spring, we look forward to publishing a dedicated web page to share all relevant information and documents. Pretty standard. We'll include some additional feedback opportunities for community members and the general public. Staff will also consult with the larger ecosystem who may be impacted by ground story use regulation changes. So this includes 2 form-based code advisory working group briefings and discussions, the first one today. We will go before ZOCO once, and we'll also start to schedule some focus groups where we will send out invitations to stakeholders such as CPRO, Pikes Presidents Group, Arlington Chamber of Commerce, NAIOP, Arlington Black Chamber of Commerce, Nova Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and commercial property owners along the Pike as well. So with our current strategy, we do anticipate bringing this to the county board in the fall. And so I will turn it over to Mark to give us a background and purpose of the study.
Thank you, Ebony, and thank you all. Good evening. My name is Mark McCauley with Arlington Economic Development in the Real Estate Development Group. So we deal with a lot of our planning and real estate issues. And as Ebony mentioned, we're closely with planning on implementation of plans. But in this case, have worked even more closely relative to the process through which we're here today. So just as a quick background, and for those of you that weren't following this way back in simpler times of 2019, the county board provided funds to Arlington Economic Development to commission a commercial market study of Columbia Pike, the extent of the Pike. That study came away with a number of conclusions that were discussed with stakeholders and presented publicly, mostly around the ideas of while the commercial market, ground floor, and other commercial spaces generally showed a healthy market in terms of occupancy and rents, that a couple of key takeaways were that the nodes along the Pike, it's a long stretch of road. It's not a single commercial market where nodes were positioned and operated differently, and that there were challenges with some of our newer form-based code projects transitioning from an auto-oriented environment to one of a more walkable mixed use, and that expanding the uses in a thoughtful way of those mixed-use buildings may be appropriate to help increase the tenant demand for those spaces and fill near-term supply as new buildings came on. We presented this study in December 2019 to the county board in a work session. What the direction the board gave staff was that they would like to, one of the 2 directions led to this, which was a targeted effort to look at uses along the ground floor, commercial uses along Columbia Pike, that there was some excitement about the idea of not only solving some near-term or even mid-term market issues, but also perhaps expanding and continue to coalesce on the uniqueness of Columbia Pike as a commercial market and continue to enhance the nodes as serving the neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhoods, and that there was essentially a message of focus less on the use prescription, but still consider impacts. So what we've done working with planning, and now as planning takes it on as part of their work plan, is the purpose of this study, which is to study a wide...
Mark, mic check, everyone. Mic check. I think we've got some open mics up there. If everyone could please check their mute and go off so Mark can do it. Thank you, Mark. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Great. Thank you. So the purpose of this study out of that background is to provide to look at the wider range of uses that may be eligible for ground floor commercial spaces, while obviously continue to reinforce and hopefully accelerate the implementation of the form-based code, to look at flexibility, particularly in areas that are transitioning, and how we look at buildings coming online and having the flexibility to fill their space and create active ground floor environments. And then again, following the board direction and the direction of the market and the conclusion of the market study to capture perhaps some unique and authentic opportunities along Columbia Pike, in particular nodes that really set the Pike as a differentiated market within Arlington. So with that, I'll let Ebony walk through the rest of it, and then I'll be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So expanding allowable uses. We've highlighted this item at a high level at the December OG, and the following list of examples draws from the market study that Mark told us about. Additionally, county staff research and input that was generously offered from CPRO and a handful of Pike commercial property owners as well. So highlighted by this lovely set of precedent images from other corridors in the county and around the region. The list of examples include pet grooming and boarding, breweries and distilleries, commercial and shared kitchens, creative workspaces and maker spaces, co-working office spaces, health and wellness uses such as gyms, spas, exercise studios, and additional public facilities that are not already permitted in categories such as public, civil, and institutional uses. So during our open discussion, please consider what opportunities and challenges this list may bring. And as we begin our community outreach and engagement, this is kind of the example list that we will share with the other stakeholders in the community and continue to refine it as we get more input and feedback. So the corridor is continuing its transition, and currently 38% of retail square footage is in new developments that are built to be urban and walkable. However, the remaining 62% of retail is in legacy storefronts constructed prior to the implementation of the code. While vacancy is low in legacy buildings, and so before the pandemic, it was around 3% vacancy rate, we feel it's important to engage with this stakeholder group to ensure that we understand the potential impact of this potential regulation change. So staff will study and develop a recommendation on whether to enable any new uses that come out of this study for sites that are not subject to FBC approvals and that would continue to rely on existing C1 and C2 zoning, such as the ski chalet. As the group most knowledgeable about the form-based code, we'd love to hear your thoughts on non-FBC developments utilizing the form-based code ground story uses table. So this item we also touched upon in briefly in September and December, and to provide a little bit more depth on it as a framework for organizing the potential regulation change, we plan to use these categories. And so uses currently not permitted but should be permitted by right or should be permitted through a use permit or that may be considered in the future. And then also uses currently permitted via use permit but should be permitted by right. So as we go into community and stakeholder engagement, we'll begin to populate these lists and solicit input to help us refine the analysis. Anything going into the 4 categories will be evaluated on their potential to adhere to the form-based code's purpose and intent of achieving a high level of pedestrian activity adjacent to the public sidewalk, interesting design, and transparency into the building. If you have feedback on specific uses that should be included in these categories, please let us know during this Q&A. Additionally, a couple of other questions that may help us in the Q&A. So thinking about what are the opportunities and challenges in general as staff looks to begin this work, and what type of information are you looking for so you can keep your groups and constituents informed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Hughes for a Q&A if we have time.
I hope that my fellow colleagues, as normally we would be rushing off to get home at this point, but luckily we just have to turn off our monitor for most of us, I believe. So I will try to ask everyone to be brief in your comments because I do not want to push time limits and we want to respect everyone's time. I do want to thank Mark from AED for joining us this evening. It's great to have you here. And with that, if any folks, I do want to remind everyone, this is the beginning of a staff process that will be an engagement process out there. So Ebony and Matt and their team from planning is going to be out there in the coming months working on really answering these questions. So right now is a good time to ask those big broad-based questions. Make sure they've got their scoping right. If there's something they're missing, they want to get out there, make sure we do it. And we all should note that Ebony's really joined us here by noticing pet grooming and knowing our history with cat cafes. So Keith, you're up first this time.
Thank you. Real quick, I noticed that, in fact, the Elliott or the Fillmore Shopping Center that you guys brought up at the beginning of our meeting, that I went online and apparently they, according to them, that they have, besides the new CVS, all the rest of the retail will be one grocer. So all the existing retail that's currently there will be gone. And that's happened in quite a few other places. So one of my main concerns, as being a longtime resident of Arlington and Columbia Pike, is that one reason that Arlington has become well known before of the funkiness. They had all these individual, unique, diverse establishments, funky ethnic restaurants, whatever, that you wouldn't find anywhere else. And what I'm seeing in all this development is the same old, because these places, they can't afford the rents. So I was just wondering, I brought this up before, I was wondering if there's any possibility or thinking of having some type percentage or some type of rent control on at least a portion of the retail spaces to allow some of these unique, diverse, independent, minority-owned places to establish themselves in the new retail spaces, instead of just having grocery stores throughout, like major retailers, and basically crowding out any other individual retail spots. Because I noticed that in Westmont, it's all going to be one grocery store, and all the retail spaces will be just one grocery store. Same thing with, like I was saying, at the Fillmore. And so we have the space there, but what I'm afraid of is that we're going to lose all the diversity that the county claims Arlington is so diverse, but we're losing it all. And we still have a lot of vacant, like Trafalgar right here in Barcroft, that's been vacant since day one. There's not that all the entire retail has been vacant since it's been built. So, and again, I don't understand why a developer, like some people can't move in there, even at a discount rate, just to put something in there, even an art installation or something that's non-commercial, instead of just having all the vacant signs there.
Okay, so Keith, what staff I hope would take out of that is, I think impacts on retail diversity should be considered as part of the study analysis, and insurance that temporary uses are considered maybe separate and distinct. I think those are the two things I heard from that.
Correct. I mean, if there's it's much rather have a pop-up instead of just having a vacant space. I mean, have something in there, or an art installation, something instead of just vacant.
The whether or not an ease of allowance of temporary usages could be allowed within a study. So good points to add to the study things. Noreen.
You already know my question, but
There's
I'm
no
going to ask
cafe.
it anyway. So does the pet boarding and grooming category also include cat cafes?
I will say traditionally in that category, when we look at examples from around the region and the country, cat cafes are not necessarily included in that. And so I can definitely continue to dig a little deeper in how a cafe might also accompany a cat.
Noreen really wants that use category placed inside there,
How many
specific
years
with
have
its
I
own
been going
definition.
after this? I mean, Steph, you should know. Anyway, yes, I am going to continue to root for my cat cafe. So please, Ebony, try to figure out a way to fit that into that list.
We will try to figure out a way for Noreen to sip her coffee and have her cat with her at the same time. So,
or at least a little kitten to play with.
I just want to see it as a temporary pop-up one day, Noreen. Just at least for one day. It would be an inside joke for us all on the Pike.
It won't be good enough for me, though. I'm just saying. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Noreen. Betty?
Just to reinforce what Keith was saying about the eclectic, eccentric nature of Columbia Pike, and that's one of the things that we love about it, that we should not just jump at giant retail to fill these spaces and drive out the small business owners and mom and pops that we treasure, and the really great restaurants. I'm curious because I can't remember, and I apologize. So would any of this encourage or prohibit the county use of space along the Pike, like a new library? And that's my question.
Ebony or Matt, civic uses are still permitted pretty much anywhere in the form-based code or existing zoning purposes, correct?
Correct. And part of the scope is we are looking at additional civic uses that should maybe be included in where it is already included, but yes, we can.
Good plug there, Betty, though, for the library. We're gonna go Steph, Kim, you had your hand up, but it's now Dawn, and then I'm gonna go down. Looks like we've got Reggie and John wanting to make some public comment. Since we have some time, I'd like to take it. So Steph, then Kim, then Reggie, then John.
So I think Kim will probably cover some of the items we've covered with Columbia Pike President's Group and others. And I did also add into the chat window. I realized that
Stop it, guys.
No, I know. That's why I'm calling it out. So there is it's called Bark Bar, and it's in Little Rock, Arkansas. So if you're looking for how to navigate the zoning and the consideration of the four-legged kids along with food issues, but it might be another aspect to consider for Columbia Pike that 80% of the county actually does not have two-legged children. So if we help to focus in on the pet area, that we become the destination along Columbia Pike. So Bark Bar, Little Rock, Arkansas serves hot dogs, but they're Angus beef, not dog, vegetarians, plus local craft beers and dog-themed cocktails, because it is helping to cater to the 80% of Arlington without the two-legged kids. And I'll be quiet now.
We're just gonna keep that pesky health inspector away, and we can have them anywhere.
Hey, Little Rock, Arkansas figured it out, and it's all legal. So, we got some great models, and the Cat Cafe is legal in Georgetown, so they figured it out too.
Yeah. Kim?
Sorry, turning stuff on. Hold on. Okay, I'm here. So first of all, as Steph mentioned, I did post into the chat a copy of the form-based code position paper. And that paper, I want to thank Steph and John Snyder and many of the folks that are actually on the meeting today, as well as our property owners, developers, and managers, because they put a lot of time, energy, and effort into that paper. If you do look at page 2, we specifically address ground floor usage. And really the goal is to be more flexible and not be as inhibitory, if that is a word. So I don't know if Steph has anything to add there, but I really highly ask you to look at page 2 of the form-based code position paper. I'm also really excited to hear when Mark and Ebony presented that they're looking to actually bring in Columbia Pike property owners, managers, and developers into the conversation, because this is impacting them. I mean, we saw 2,400 plans today. They are under the old rules of form-based code and ground floor usage. And things could change. There could be more flexibility. There could be a lot more diversity and uniqueness on the ground floor on the Pike, and that's what is exciting.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. All right, we're gonna do some public comments since we still have. I will cut us off at 9:30, but we still got plenty of time. Reggie and then John. Reggie, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I got my hand up. The previous speakers have kind of addressed sort of my issue, but I was concerned about existing property owners along the Pike and whether there'd be any discussion about providing incentives for them to encourage where there is retail space to encourage that kind of diversity that was spoken of earlier, just to incentivize existing property owners that have been there for ages and they haven't to date done much to make a more flexible use of ground space. It seems like probably the position paper might have included some of my issues. But my only concern was incentivizing existing commercial property owners along the Pike. That was it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Reggie. John?
Yes. I just wanted to highlight something that Mark actually brought up, which is to focus less on the use and more on the impact. And by that, it's looking at what's the impact on the neighbors in the building, around the building, et cetera, rather than trying to prescribe the uses. We should be careful going forward that we don't turn a short list of allowed uses into a longer list, both of which cut off innovation, that great idea that none of us on this meeting have thought of. But we want, people to be able to try something new, as long as it's not, messing with the neighbors.
No biochem labs.
It's hard to
or
write
meth
a code
labs,
that.
That's
Yeah, well, yeah. It also has to be legal, but, and otherwise legal. But the idea is to open it up so that we're looking at what's the impact on other people around it, rather than trying, to impose our taste on what kind of business would be there. Let's let the market figure that out, and let's let the entrepreneurs with the really good ideas give it a try on the Pike. One last point, as everyone looks at this for precedent, we are an economic revitalization district. So when we're trying something new here, it doesn't mean that we're now going to be allowing that everywhere else in Arlington. So this is some place where we're allowed to, try some things that maybe people wouldn't be comfortable doing somewhere else. That's okay. They don't have to be, because we're only doing it on the Pike. If it turns out well, they can copy it.
No, let's not
turns
spread
out
the good
poorly,
word,
they can
John.
learn. So that's it.
That's a good comment. No, it's very innovative, and I think staff's going to take back all of what they hear tonight and help them in their scoping of what they're moving forward with. So it's incumbent upon all of us as neighbors and as members of the community to press our own understanding of the code to our neighbors, and especially as staff begins the outreach process for this use studies, to help our neighbors understand the I think what many of us have is the same goal, which is both to expand the uses and allow the most flexibility, while at the same time not infringing upon our neighbors, and preserving as much as what we can as far as the amazing, eclectic nature of our Pike and opportunities for our businesses to flourish. So I think that's what's out there. Juliet, I see your hand came up there.
Yes, I just wanted to make a plug for performing arts, because we do have a need for more performing arts in the county, and I would like to be able to have people think about that. Of course, we have to have a concern about noise, particularly late in the day, but I think that that's something that we should be looking at.
Okay. What if any preclusions we have within our use standards? Okay. Ebony, anything else, more feedback you're looking for, or you feel like you've gotten a good taste of the Pike this evening for helping you in the scoping of this plan?
I think we've had a good taste, and you all definitely have, my contact info, our contact info. And so if other things kind of come to your mind, or you hear from your groups, please don't hesitate to reach out. And, this recording will be on on our OG page, and also the presentation and materials are already there. And so please feel free to, keep your eye on it. And we look forward to coming back probably over the summer, and once we have done a little bit more work.
Okay. Thank you, Ebony. And for all of you this evening, it is 9:15. I'm going to let everybody go home and turn off their computer. It's been great to see and hear everyone this evening. And do remember to make sure you are the megaphone to spread out the word on the Pike on the things that we've just heard this evening that's coming out. So appreciate everyone's time and have a good. Oh, Kathy.
I'm really sorry to do this at the 11th hour. Very, very quickly, modality of participation issue. We are still having issues with the access for this platform. I know we say on the webpage that if you download the free Teams software, you can access closed captioning. But I did that, and closed captioning is still not an option under the Ellipse. And I believe with a bit of research, it could be an admin console issue. So if we could ask staff to please check that there is generic access to closed captioning for anybody who joins our public meeting, restricted access, that would be really helpful. I know we're trying to make sure that any member of the public has full access to these meetings. So I just wanted to flag that very quickly. Thank you.
No, thank you, Kathy. As always, it's a learning process. So, and I always take pride, we're the ones who trailblaze sometimes on the Pike. So thank you, Kathy. With that, everyone, have a good evening, and see you all hopefully in the coming months. Take care.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.